The candlelight flickered across the polished surface of the table, casting shadows that felt more honest than the smiles surrounding me. My 30-year-old birthday dinner was in full swing at an upscale rooftop restaurant where my family insisted on projecting an image of effortless perfection. My name is Hannah, and I teach second grade at a public school in Portland. In this family, that makes me a bit of an embarrassment. Vanessa, my older sister by 5 years, raised her glass with the confidence of someone who always knew they were adored. Her sleek red dress fit like it was made for her. It probably was. Her lips curled into a smirk as she handed me a box wrapped in shiny paper and a ribbon too perfect to have been tied by hand. I hesitated. Every year, Vanessa's gifts walked the line between insult and performance art. Last year, it was a gym membership. The year before that, a book titled How to Fix Your Life Without Really Trying. This year, she leaned in, eyes gleaming. "Open it." I peeled back the paper, revealing a familiar blue and white logo. A DNA test kit. She laughed loud and carefree. "Maybe this will explain why you're the family's biggest disappointment." The table erupted in polite laughter. My mother giggled nervously. My father looked mildly amused. My stomach twisted. The waiter who had just appeared with our wine glanced at me with a flicker of sympathy before retreating. "That was a joke, right, Vanessa?" My mother said, her voice laced with that performative warmth she reserved for moments of tension. "Of course," Vanessa said, tossing her hair. "I mean, how else do we explain why little sister here grew up so allergic to ambition?" I felt the heat rise to my face, but I smiled. I always smiled. That was my role in this production. "I think it's thoughtful," I said, placing the box carefully beside my plate. "Science is cool," Dad chuckled. "Now maybe we'll find out if you're descended from hobbits. That would explain the height." More laughter. "I am 5'2". The joke had been made 1,000 times before. Vanessa raised her glass again. "To our Hannah, the family's gentle spirit and most confusing gene pool." They clinked glasses. I sipped my water. Later that night, I sat alone in my apartment, the test kit lying on my kitchen counter like a dare. The box was still unopened, the ribbon untouched. I stared at it for a long time. Maybe they were right. Maybe I did not belong. I opened the box and followed the instructions, spitting into the tube and sealing it with shaking hands. I dropped it into the prepaid envelope and slid it into the mailbox the next morning. I told myself I was doing it for fun, for curiosity, for closure. But if I am being honest, I wanted an answer. I wanted to know why I had always felt like a guest in my own life. I was born into a family where achievement was currency and emotional expression was a liability. My parents, Arthur and Denise Langford, had built a public image around excellence. My father ran Langford Construction, one of the largest firms on the West Coast, while my mother chaired multiple philanthropic boards and regularly appeared in glossy magazine features on powerful women in society. Their world was full of galas, press releases, and strategic networking. And then there was me. I was the daughter who read books instead of stock reports, who volunteered at animal shelters instead of shadowing my dad at construction sites. The girl who chose a degree in early childhood education when everyone expected business or law. I remember the day I told them I was going to be a teacher. My father blinked once, then said, "That's admirable," with the same tone someone might use to describe volunteer garbage collectors. My mother simply asked if I had considered a master's in educational policy, instead something more impactful. My sister Vanessa had always been the star. She went to Stanford, launched a startup by 24, and had her first $1 million funding round before I finished grad school. By 29, she was on the Forbes Women to Watch list. At family functions, the conversations revolved around her travel schedule, her wardrobe, and her next big move. Whenever I spoke, the room shifted its focus like I was background noise. Vanessa and I were opposites in every visible way. She was tall, blonde, sleek. I had wild brown curls, a round face, and a closet full of discount cardigans. She made headlines. I made bulletin boards for my classroom. Growing up, Vanessa played piano competitively, won science fairs, spoke 3 languages. I painted quietly in my room and wrote short stories no one read. My parents called her the future and me sweet. Even the word they used for me sounded like a consolation prize. Sweet. As if that was all I had to offer. My relationship with Vanessa was complicated. There were moments, especially when we were little, where she'd braid my hair and read me books. She taught me how to climb out the window without making the alarm beep. But those moments faded with age, replaced by sarcasm and condescension. She never hit me, never yelled. Her weapon was wit, and she wielded it like a scalpel. The DNA test wasn't the first time she had made me the punchline of her jokes, but it was the first time something about it lingered. I could not stop hearing her voice in my head. Maybe this will explain why you're the family's biggest disappointment. I kept working, of course. My students were my joy. They loved me in the unfiltered, sincere way only children could. When one of them drew a picture of me as a superhero in a red cape, I nearly cried. At school, I mattered. At home, I was wallpaper. Still, I showed up to every family event, brought store-bought desserts with homemade labels, smiled in group photos, and left before dessert was served. I had learned how to be invisible in plain sight. It was a survival tactic. The truth is, I had long ago accepted my role. The afterthought. The odd one. The gentle disappointment. Until that test. Until the email arrived. It was like something had cracked. A quiet voice inside me stirred, whispering that maybe, just maybe, I had the right to ask questions too. The day I received the first email from the DNA company, I was cleaning out a closet. I nearly missed it in the flood of spam. The subject line was simple. Action required regarding your DNA sample. At first, I assumed it was a glitch. I clicked it almost lazily, expecting a sales pitch. What I read instead sent a jolt through me. Your DNA results have identified rare inheritance markers that require confidential verification. Please contact our estate liaison team at your earliest convenience. I blinked, reread it, and laughed nervously. Inheritance liaison team. This had to be a mistake. But attached was a document with a header from Hastings and Hale, a law firm I recognized. They handled my grandmother Margaret's estate years ago. I hadn't thought of Grandma Margaret in so long. She died when I was 20. Quiet, elegant, fiercely intelligent. She always carried around these leather journals and seemed to see everything without saying much. She and I had a strange kind of bond, not loud or obvious, but real. She was the only adult who ever asked me real questions as a child, who told me stories that ended in lessons, not lectures. And now, somehow, she was part of this. I stared at the email, heart pounding. I clicked the contact link. A phone number appeared. I dialed it before I could change my mind. A soft-voiced assistant answered, then transferred me to a man who introduced himself as Preston Hale, lead attorney for the Hastings and Hale estate team. Ms. Langford, he said we need to meet. There is a matter of considerable importance tied to your DNA results and the late Margaret Hastings trust. My voice barely worked. Why? Because, Ms. Langford, he said after a pause. According to our database and her directives, you may be the sole living heir to a trust she kept outside the family's knowledge, a trust that requires direct genetic verification for activation. I sat there, stunned. I wasn't just the black sheep. I was suddenly, inexplicably, the key to a legacy no one even knew existed. I arrived at the law office the following afternoon, still unsure whether this was all some elaborate mistake. The firm was housed in a sandstone building with ivy crawling up the facade, nestled between two embassies in the city's old quarter. Everything about it screamed old money and quiet power. A receptionist greeted me with the kind of trained warmth that felt more like choreography than kindness. She offered me tea. I declined. After a few minutes, a man in a tailored gray suit appeared. Preston Hale. His handshake was firm, but not aggressive. He led me to a room with tall windows, heavy drapes, and a table that looked like it belonged in a courtroom. "Thank you for coming so quickly, Ms. Langford," he said as he opened a leather-bound folder. "I understand this is all very unexpected." I nodded. "That's one way to put it." He slid a document toward me. "This is a copy of your DNA verification cross-referenced with genetic data left in our trust archive by your grandmother Margaret Hastings. It confirms a direct maternal link. You are the only living descendant who matches the required genetic markers she specified." "Why would she do that?" I asked, my voice hollow. She believed he said carefully that family was not always defined by proximity or performance, but by truth. She built a separate trust funded entirely through assets she managed independently. That trust was to remain dormant until a qualified heir was identified, and now I've qualified. You have? The trust includes liquid assets, property investments, a collection of rare art, and substantial stock holdings. Current estimated value is just over $22 million. The room tilted. What? It is not an error, he said gently. This was Margaret's final wish. She left instructions legal safeguards, and he reached into the folder again, a letter. For you. The envelope was thick handwritten, sealed in wax. My name in elegant cursive. Hannah. My hands trembled. I did not open it. Not yet. Does anyone else know about this? Not yet. But per the terms of the trust, we must inform the family within 72 hours. That soon, transparency, Ms. Langford. Margaret believed in truth even if it hurts. They're going to lose it. Probably, but her instructions were clear. The trust is legally airtight. I left the office in a daze, the letter pressed against my chest like a second heartbeat. The next morning, I received a message from Vanessa. It was a selfie her in a silk robe holding a mimosa. Some of us are already making boss moves before breakfast. What are you up to, little sister? I stared at the photo, then at the unopened envelope on my nightstand. She had no idea what was coming. But part of me didn't want to hurt her. Part of me still believed maybe she was just a product of our parents' design, just like I was. The line between victim and villain blurred when it came to family. Still, the truth was moving a current I could no longer resist. I finally opened the letter. It was dated 2 weeks before Grandma Margaret died. My dearest Hannah, if you are reading this, it means what I suspected was true, that you are the one, the only one. I know this may come as a shock. You have spent much of your life feeling like you didn't belong. I know because I saw it too. They celebrated Vanessa. They ignored you. But I saw what others missed, your empathy, your strength, your quiet resolve. This trust is not just money. It is freedom. It is proof. Use it wisely. And never forget you were never a disappointment. You were simply underestimated. Love always. Grandma M. I cried, not just for the words, but for the years I had convinced myself they weren't true. I called Preston. I'm ready, I said. Let's inform them. The meeting was scheduled for Friday. A mandatory family discussion, he called it. I knew the moment the words left his mouth, my parents would assume it was about business. My mother probably expected a charitable event. My father a tax issue. Vanessa, if she even registered it, would treat it as another formality she would dominate. But this time, none of them were in control. When the day arrived, I wore a simple navy dress and low heels. I wanted no distractions, no armor, just clarity. My parents arrived first, arguing about valet parking. Vanessa swept in 15 minutes late, air-kissed everyone, and sat with a sigh like she had a million more important things to do. Preston began by thanking everyone for their time. Then he explained that new information regarding the estate of Margaret Hastings had surfaced, that it involved genetic verification, that it had legal consequences. My parents exchanged confused glances. Vanessa rolled her eyes. This is about that silly DNA test, she asked, because I just did mine and it said I'm like 6% Scandinavian. Super fascinating. Preston didn't flinch. The DNA in question pertains to a trust established by Ms. Hastings 20 years ago, a trust requiring direct maternal lineage to access. That would be me, my mother said confidently. Not quite, Preston replied. The inheritance was intended for her granddaughter. The match was found in Ms. Hannah Langford. Silence. It spread across the room like ink in water. My father sat back blinking. My mother opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. Hannah Vanessa laughed. Wait, you're saying she gets what A painting? She gets everything, Preston said. $22 million in diversified assets. My mother whispered something inaudible. My father looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Vanessa stood up. This is insane! Run the test again. It has been verified by 3 independent labs. There is no error. I'm the firstborn, she snapped. I've carried this family's name, its image. I've worked my entire life to be worthy. That may be true, Preston said. But this trust was not about appearances. It was about truth. Vanessa turned to my mother. Tell them this is wrong. My mother's hands were shaking. I can't. Vanessa froze. What? Can't, my mother repeated. Because you're not Arthur's daughter. The words landed like thunder. No one moved. No one breathed. Vanessa's face drained of color. My father stared at my mother with quiet devastation. I remained still. Finally, Vanessa whispered, You knew. My mother nodded. All these years, it was one mistake. We were separated. I never wanted it to matter. But it does, Vanessa said. It matters now? Vanessa did not sit down. She looked like someone who had just been pushed off a ledge but had not yet hit the ground. Her jaw clenched. Her fists were balled at her sides. You're lying, she said. This is some kind of scheme, some setup to humiliate me. You're jealous. You always have been. I stared at her not with anger, but with something quieter. Sadness, maybe. Exhaustion. I didn't plan any of this, Vanessa. I didn't even want it. I just took the test because you gave it to me. As a joke, she snapped. It was supposed to be a joke. Not this. Preston cleared his throat. Ms. Langford, I understand this is difficult. But the results are conclusive, and the trust is protected against dispute. It cannot be transferred or divided. My father finally spoke. His voice was low, uneven. Is this true, Denise? My mother nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the table. I never meant for it to come out. It was one time. A mistake. I thought it was behind us. He exhaled through his nose like trying to contain a lifetime of rage and disappointment. And you let me raise her, as mine. She is yours, my mother said quickly. In every way that matters, not legally, not biologically. Arthur, she pleaded, don't say that. She's our daughter. Is she? He asked coldly, and Vanessa flinched like he had struck her. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. The room was unraveling. Decades of secrets boiling over in real time. Why now, my father asked, not to anyone in particular. Why all of this now? Preston folded his hands. Because Margaret believed the truth would find its way eventually. She built this trust for Hannah because she saw something in her. Something the rest of you refused to see. Vanessa laughed, sharp and bitter. So what now? She gets a check and we get what, an apology, a thank you card. You get the truth, I said quietly. You get what I lived with for 30 years. She turned to me, eyes wild. You think you've suffered? You think it's hard being you? Try being me. Try being perfect every second of your life. Try carrying every expectation, every spotlight, every impossible standard. No one asked you to, I said. You chose that path. You wore that crown. And you made sure to step on me every chance you got while wearing it. You were never competition, she hissed. Exactly, I said. And that's why this hurts. Preston stood. I think we should conclude this meeting. Ms. Langford will have immediate access to the trust. We will handle the formal documentation this week. My mother looked at me as if trying to find a version of me she could understand. Hannah, she whispered, you'll share some of it, won't you? For the family. I stared at her for a long moment. Why would I do that? Because we're your parents. Were you? I asked. Or were you just managing a product you liked less than the first one? My father winced. Vanessa sat down heavily like her body had finally realized the weight of what had happened. I stood clutching the envelope with my grandmother's handwriting. I won't fight you. I won't argue. But I also won't forget. And I won't pretend this didn't happen. Preston nodded toward the door. We'll be in touch. I left without looking back. Outside, the sky was overcast, the air sharp with approaching rain. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Preston. One line. Transfer complete. You are now the full beneficiary. I stared at the screen. For a long moment, I felt nothing. Then, I felt everything. That night, I sat in my apartment, the official documents spread across my kitchen table. Account balances, property deeds, investment portfolios, all mine. All real. I made a list, not of things to buy, but of things to change. First, I pulled out of my father's company, quietly. I had no intention of staying connected to his legacy. I had inherited something different, something cleaner, something earned. Then I contacted my school principal. I offered to fund a scholarship for students who wanted to become teachers, in Grandma Margaret's name. He cried. I almost did too. I reached out to a nonprofit that supported children in foster care, set up a monthly donation, no press, no interviews, just action. The next day, I met with a financial advisor, a woman in her 50s named Carla who wore reading glasses on a chain and asked me the one question no one else had. What do you want this money to do for you? I didn't know. Not yet, but for the first time I wanted to find out. I started making calls, not to my family, to myself, to people I had ignored, to parts of me I had buried. I booked a solo trip to Italy, something I had dreamed about but never justified. I painted again. I wrote short stories. I stopped apologizing for my joy. My parents tried to reach me. Vanessa sent emails. One of them said simply, "You've made your point." But I hadn't made a point. I had made a life. The twist wasn't the inheritance. It wasn't the DNA. It was that I had finally stopped living in someone else's definition of me. That was the real revelation. And that was just the beginning. The invitation came on a Tuesday afternoon, tucked inside a cream-colored envelope slid under my apartment door. My name was printed in sharp black letters on the front. No return address. I opened it slowly, already sensing what was inside. You are formally requested to attend a family meeting at the Langford Estate this Saturday at 4 p.m. Attendance is expected. Matters of importance will be discussed. There was no signature, but I knew it was from my father. That was his tone. Commanding. Cold. I almost threw it away. I almost let silence be my answer. But something pulled at me. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was closure. Maybe it was something uglier. Anger sharpened over years of being ignored, now waiting for a stage. I arrived at 3:59. The Langford estate had not changed. A massive stone house behind iron gates, manicured hedges. A driveway long enough to lose your intentions in. The kind of house built to look permanent, immune to scandal, designed for legacy. I rang the bell. The housekeeper let me in, eyes wide, with the weight of gossip she could not speak aloud. I walked through the marble foyer, familiar but no longer warm. My mother was already seated in the drawing room, her posture perfect, hands clenched around a silk handkerchief. She wore pearls and regret. My father stood near the fireplace, staring into it like he expected answers in the flames. Vanessa was last to arrive. She looked thinner, her usually flawless makeup slightly cracked. Her eyes flicked to me, then away. The air was thick with silence. No one spoke for several long seconds. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "Thank you for coming." I said nothing. "We are here," he continued, "because the current situation has caused complications." My mother added publicly, privately, emotionally. "The press has started asking questions about the trust, about Margaret." I raised an eyebrow. And we need to manage the narrative," my father said. "This family cannot survive scandal." I laughed, quietly, bitterly. "You're not worried about the truth. You're worried about your reputation." "They're the same," my mother said. "Not to me." Vanessa finally spoke. "You made a spectacle of us. You humiliated us." I turned to her. "I did nothing but exist. Everything else was your doing." She leaned forward. "You could have kept it quiet. You could have come to me first and said what? That your joke gift blew up your image? That your perfect life was built on a lie?" Her face twisted. "You think this makes you better?" "No," I said. "It makes me free." My father stepped in. "Enough. We called you here to make an offer. We propose a split. The trust funds. 70-30. You keep majority control. We gain stability." I stared at him. "You're asking me to give back what was never yours. We're asking for family consideration." "Funny," I said. I don't remember you considering me when I was being mocked at every dinner, or ignored, or sidelined. That was never intentional, my mother whispered. It was systemic, I replied. There's a difference. Vanessa's voice broke. So what? This is revenge. This is restoration, I said. And boundaries. We raised you, my father snapped. You owe us. You raised a version of me that suited your comfort, the real me. You never saw her. So you'll do nothing, my mother asked. You'll leave us like this. You left me like this for 30 years, I said. Now you know what it feels like. What would Margaret think? Vanessa said. I pulled her letter from my bag, placed it on the table. She thought this was justice, and now so do I. My father looked down at the envelope but didn't touch it. My mother blinked back tears that never fell. Vanessa stared at the rug. No one stopped me as I walked out of the room, out of the house, and out of their version of family for good. The silence that followed my exit was not the end. It was the beginning of something colder, something calculated. I had no desire for drama, no intention to shout. But I would not let their cruelty, their silence, their years of erasure pass without consequence. I began with the trust. I liquidated specific holdings tied directly to Langford Construction. I redirected investments. I met with my financial advisor 3 times that week, laying out a plan that would sever all financial entanglements with my father's empire. The ripple effect was immediate. A long-standing investor inspired by my exit pulled out, then another. Within a month, Langford Construction lost a multi-million-dollar contract with a government development project. My father released a public statement citing market instability, but I knew, and he knew, the foundation was cracking. Vanessa's startup was next. Her company relied heavily on branding partnerships, most of which were tied to high-profile clients with ties to Margaret Hastings's legacy institutions. Quietly, I contacted those boards and informed them of my decision to discontinue grants donations and legacy funding if they continued their partnership with Vanessa's firm. I never lied. I never threatened. I simply told them the truth. That she had built her success on a foundation that never included the whole story. Within weeks, 3 major clients withdrew. Her social media presence softened. Her lifestyle shifted. The photos of champagne and jet setting were replaced with yoga quotes and digital detox updates. My mother's charity circles began to crumble too. A quiet phone call here, a polite withdrawal there. I removed the Langford name from 3 foundations. One of them had a gala in 2 months. I declined their invitation with a simple note: I do not support institutions built on silence. Word spread. Rumors began. No one knew the full story, but they knew something had changed. The golden Langford name was losing its shine. I stayed quiet. I did not gloat. I did not post. I did not reply to messages from journalists or influencers who wanted the story. I let the silence speak, and in that silence I built. I created the Hastings Langford Education Fund targeting young girls from low-income families who had been made to feel small, invisible, inadequate. The first cohort launched with 50 scholarships. I visited every school. I spoke to every student. I saw their faces bright and alive and so full of potential. It reminded me why I had become a teacher in the first place. I moved into a modest but beautiful brownstone filled with books and sunlight. I adopted a rescue dog named Penny. I painted again. I wrote again. I laughed without waiting for permission. My former students sent me drawings in the mail. One of them wrote, "You are the best teacher in the world, even if you are a millionaire now." I framed it. Vanessa tried to call. She sent me an email. No apology, just a subject line. What now? I did not reply. My father sent a formal request through his attorney to discuss the path forward. I shredded it. My mother sent flowers. I left them on the curb. One evening I received a knock on my door. It was Morgan, Vanessa's oldest friend. I had not seen her in over a year. She wore sunglasses and a strained smile. We chatted. She danced around her purpose until finally she said, "Everyone's talking about you. You've become a symbol." I laughed. "I'm not a symbol. I'm a woman who stopped waiting for approval." Morgan's face hardened. "Just be careful. People don't like it when you rewrite the story." I smiled. That's the only reason to tell it. After she left, I poured a glass of wine and stood at my window. The city pulsed below. Somewhere out there, the version of me they had once crafted was dissolving. The Hannah they underestimated, the disappointment, the invisible daughter. She was gone. In her place stood a woman with clarity, with control, with legacy. I never wanted revenge. I wanted recognition. I wanted respect. They could keep their last names, their gated homes, their curated identities. I had something better, the freedom to choose who I became, the power to be heard without raising my voice. I went to sleep that night not with anger, but with peace. They had taken enough. I would give them nothing more. 3 months after the confrontation, I received an invitation I did not expect. It was handwritten, sealed in a soft blue envelope, and delivered by courier. Inside was a note from my mother, the handwriting shaky but unmistakably hers. It read, "We are hosting a private dinner. Just family. There are things that need to be said. I do not expect forgiveness, only your presence." The signature at the bottom was simply Mom. I stared at the card for a long time. Every instinct in me said to decline to throw it away, to let the silence finish what it had started. But there was another part of me, not forgiveness exactly, but a kind of curiosity, a desire to see what remained after the storm. So I went. The Langford dining room had not changed. The chandelier sparkled. The table was set with polished silver and fine china. It was a room built for performance, for the illusion of unity. My father sat at the head of the table, more gray around the temples, his eyes dimmer. My mother looked older, her skin drawn tighter around her cheekbones, her voice softer. Vanessa was there too, sitting to the side, her posture rigid. I took the seat furthest from them. No one spoke for the first few minutes. The sound of cutlery and glasses filled the room like background noise in a scene we had all played too many times. Finally, my mother spoke. "Thank you for coming." I nodded but said nothing. My father cleared his throat. "We owe you more than we gave. That much is clear." I sipped my water. Vanessa looked at me and then down at her plate. I've started seeing someone," she said. "A therapist." "I'm working on some things." I raised an eyebrow. "That's good." My mother's hands trembled slightly. "We wanted you to know that we're aware now of how things were, how we treated you." I didn't respond. The silence stretched long. My father finally looked directly at me. "You were never a disappointment. We just didn't understand how to love you properly." I placed my napkin on the table. "You still don't. But maybe that's okay. Not everyone gets a redemption arc. Sometimes they just get truth." Vanessa swallowed hard. "I'm sorry for what I said. At your birthday. At the meeting. In general. It wasn't about you. It was about me. My own fear. My own shame." I looked at her. Her eyes were glossy, her voice unsteady. This was the most human she had ever been in my presence. "Thank you," I said quietly. "That doesn't erase things, but it matters." My mother reached across the table but stopped halfway. "We're trying, Hannah. We really are. I know I said, and I'm living my life finally, with or without your applause." We ended the meal in quiet conversation. No grand reconciliations, no dramatic hugs, just a room full of people trying to navigate the wreckage they had helped create. As I walked to the door, Vanessa followed. She hesitated. "I know I said you were the family's biggest disappointment, but honestly, you're the only one of us who did anything real." I didn't respond. I just opened the door and stepped into the night. The air was cool. The stars were visible. I breathed in deeply like someone who had been holding it too long. The next morning, I stood in front of a group of new scholarship students, girls aged 10 to 16, their eyes wide with hope and fear and curiosity. I told them my story, not the wealth, not the drama, just the journey. I told them they mattered even if no one clapped when they spoke. I told them they were enough. That night, I read the last page of my grandmother's journal again. It said, "If you're reading this, it means you chose not just to survive, but to lead, to stand where I couldn't, to rebuild where others broke." I closed the journal and placed it beside my bed. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Tyrese, my cousin. "Heard what you're doing with the foundation. Proud of you. Let me know if I can help. I smiled. Maybe I was alone at that dinner table, but I wasn't alone in the world. I had built something real, something enduring. I looked out the window. The city glowed with a quiet kind of beauty. It reminded me that beginnings never announce themselves with trumpets. They arrive quietly like breath returning, and I was breathing again, not for approval, not for love, just for myself.